I think we're going to have a very interesting evening tonight with a discussion with Susan Shelley, who is with us for this evening and for the balance of the night, which is kind of nice. We always appreciate her being around, and she has always good things to be saying. So let's go ahead and get the meeting started at this point in time. I'll call the meeting to order. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Those who are able to stand, please do so. And Susan, if you would be kind enough to go ahead and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be great.
Hand over your heart. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to the
to the
flag
flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States
of
of
America and to
and
the
to the republic
republic for
for
which
which
it
it stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice for
for
all.
all.
Thank you for that. We always open our meeting with the pledge for sure. Just a reminder that our newsletter went out to all of our members today. If you're not a member, you won't get it. It'll be up online in a couple of days. We'll put it up then. You should always take a look at our newsletter. We always have interesting things to be saying in that. A lot that's been going on concerning the Woodland Hills Golf Course and a lot of the legislation we'll talk some about tonight as well. Take a look at our advertisers at the end of that newsletter. It's important to let them know that you see them, that you're responsible, they're being responsible to us and you're responsible to them too, to utilize their services where you can. They've been supporting us for years, and it's important that you let them know that as well. Membership is only $25 for the entire household per year. Those monies help us with being able to offset some of the expenses that we have that come up from time to time. We're all volunteers. Nobody gets paid for anything we're doing here. Um, and our meetings are important to us. I'm Johnny Walker. I'm the president of the Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization. Dennis DiBiase is with us. He's vice president. Marty Lipkin is also one of our vice presidents. Our secretary is Nancy Porter. Treasurer is Shelley Schwartz. By the way, Susan, I'm going to call you Shelley from time to time because I will do that because of Susan, because of Shelley Schwartz. Stop me and say it's Susan, please. I know I'm going
Okay.
to do that. One of our board members is Arnie Cohn, and Colleen Schwartz is online with us too, and Scott Silverstein. Our next meeting is going to be on March the 25th. Our speaker is not announced yet. If anybody has suggestions of who they'd like to hear from, please let us know. Well, tonight, we're very pleased to have Susan Shelley, not Shelley, but Susan Shelley with us tonight. Uh, as you may know, that Susan is an editorial writer and a columnist with the Southern California News Group. All of us, I think, get a chance to read her articles quite often and get a chance to see about some of the good stuff and bad stuff that's going on. A lot of it, unfortunately, is just bad. She writes about local, state, and national issues. Vice President of Communications of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, and a frequent guest on radio and television and podcast, and also was a former candidate for a state assembly. I think that was Jesse Gabriel's position, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
When Jesse terms out, you're going to run again?
Oh, it's maybe Matt Dubobney, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, maybe. Or
He's
maybe Bob's
probably
position.
available.
Yeah,
You could
okay.
call him.
Well, never know.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, we appreciate you coming in and giving us some ideas of these things that are going on in our community. You have a different perspective of what a lot of people do that we'll be talking to otherwise. A lot of stuff going on in Sacramento. I think that um, one of the things that we've noticed is that Sacramento apparently has gotten the wrong idea that somehow we've sent them up there to basically destroy our communities and our neighborhoods and to basically shred our zoning laws and change those things. They also are after our Prop 213 and the tax exemptions that we have in a lot of areas for our own properties. I think what I'd like for you to do is to go ahead and explain to us, if you will, what Prop 13 is all about. And there's a petition that's been circulated around by your organization and what that means, why it's going on, what Sacramento trying to do, and why they are after us. What's going on here? So, Susan, turn the floor over to you, and we'll come back with a lot of questions for you, I'm sure.
Okay. Well,
Pleasure.
thank you. Thank you so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a Woodland Hills resident, proudly so, and I share all of your concerns about all of what Sacramento is doing to us. What happened with Prop 13 is that it passed in 1978 against the better judgment of everyone in government and everyone who wanted to raise taxes. And they have been mad about it ever since. So generation after generation of lawmakers, city officials, state officials, county officials, they want to destroy Prop 13. And it's been a war basically back and forth between ballot measures and different things that these governments have been trying to do. It's been a war back and forth for 46 or 47 years now. And the latest battle happened in 2017 when the state Supreme Court sort of hinted, without exactly deciding, that if a tax increase was put on the ballot by a citizens' initiative, if the citizens wanted to raise their own taxes, well, then the Constitution didn't apply.
Well,
And this was
tell us what Prop 13, what the protections were initially
the
that we
protections
had,
initially.
and then what they're trying to do to get rid of those.
Okay, the protections initially, before Prop 13, property was taxed at its current market value every year, and the average tax rate was 2.67%. So that was obviously taxing people out of their homes as values of property took these huge leaps year after year with inflation in the 1970s. Prop 13 capped the increases in taxable value for as long as the property is under the same ownership at 2% a year. It's only with a change of ownership or new construction that there's a reassessment to market value. And with new construction, only of the new construction, not the whole property. So that was a very significant protection. And Prop 13 cut the tax rate from the statewide average of 2.67% to 1%. Saved people a lot of money. And because Howard Jarvis, who was the proponent of it, knew that the government officials who hated it would try to get the money from the same people some other way, Prop 13 has protections in it, including state taxes can only be raised with a 2/3 vote of the legislature. Local taxes had to go on the ballot for the first time, statewide, all local taxes. Special taxes, the courts decided, which were taxes that applied where the money was applied to something specific that was disclosed at the start, reserved for a special purpose, those required a 2/3 vote, and general taxes, a simple majority, but they all had to go on the ballot. And transfer taxes, real estate transfer taxes, which Howard Jarvis saw as a way that governments would try to use a sales tax at the end to take back all your tax savings, those were banned. And ad valorem taxes, which are taxes on the value of your property. So a city would think of maybe doing just an additional property tax for the city, banned. No transfer taxes, no ad valorem taxes, everything else on the ballot, 2/3 vote for special taxes. So what's been happening since then, what happened in 2017, is this giant loophole was created where the 2/3 vote didn't apply if the tax increase was put on the ballot through signatures with a citizens initiative. So the identical tax measure that the Board of Supervisors might do would require a 2/3 vote. You take that same measure word for word, you put it on a petition on a clipboard and collect signatures to put it on the ballot, it would only need a simple majority. Since 2017, this has been happening everywhere. It happened in San Francisco. Literally, the supervisors wrote the measure and went out to the sidewalk and said, this is a citizen's petition. This is a citizen's initiative. We're citizens. And they literally took their same tax increase that would have required a 2/3 vote at their desk and took it out to the sidewalk. And it went on the ballot. It was a special tax. It went on the ballot. It passed with 50.8%. And they said, that's it. It's a majority. It passes. And then they watched to see what the courts would do. Well, everybody sued and lost and went to the appellate court and lost. And this happened in Fresno. It happened in San Diego. It happened in Los Angeles. Now it's considered routine that there are two thresholds for passing tax increases. One if it's with signatures, one if it's with a vote of a government body. This is right out of the air. It makes no sense. It has enabled special interest groups literally to write their own tax increase, direct all the money to themselves, collect signatures to put it on the ballot, and pass it without getting a 2/3 vote. That's how we got Measure A, the county sales tax increase for homelessness in November 2024. That's how we got Measure ULA, the giant transfer tax of 4 or 5.5% on high value properties, which has had such a terrible effect on the LA real estate market. That's how we're getting taxes all up and down the state. There's one that's going on in the Bay Area right now for transit, a sales tax increase to bail out BART. It's a so-called citizens initiative that just happened to originate with government officials. This is happening everywhere. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association wants to close this loophole, and the Local Taxpayer Protection Act, to save Proposition 13, that's the full title of it, would close the loophole. It would say 2/3 means 2/3, no matter how it gets on the ballot. And it bans transfer taxes. Again, Same thing that was done originally. It's still in the Constitution, but we're saying it again. Transfer taxes above the original 0.11% that existed at the time of Prop 13. Everything higher than that is banned going forward. And where they exist, they are sunsetted and will automatically be repealed 2 years after the approval of the measure. So that's the Local Taxpayer Protection Act. Today, the proponents turned in 1.3 million signatures to the 58 county offices. We expect that this is going to be on the November ballot. And it's a very exciting, aggressive move by taxpayers to defend the rights of the people of California, that they can't just erase them in the courts. We have a big problem with that, just erasing rights in the courts selectively. That's not good. So that's that. And the larger picture of why we can't get decent representation in Sacramento that cares about people like us, people who pay taxes, who own property, who are the longtime residents of the community, who do all the civic work and civic activity and who care about the community. Why is it that they don't care about us? And you're not going to like the answer. But the answer starts with the fact that there's a global perspective that has permeated the majority party in California, where they feel that the climate is more important than the constituents. And so they have essentially reached the conclusion that we cannot build any housing in outlying areas. They call it the urban boundary. You may be familiar with it. So there's an urban boundary, an imaginary line that they drew around the cities in California. And if you go beyond that, it becomes very expensive or impossible to build housing. The reason is they think that driving to work is bad for the climate. Now, just for reference, China generates its electricity 62% with coal. They're on the same planet with us. So not building houses past Newbury Park, I don't know that that really affects the climate. Nobody's ever been able to prove that it does. What they say is we must show leadership in California. Well, while they're showing leadership, people are suffering. There's not enough housing being built. And their response to that, rather than give up their goal of never allowing what they call sprawl and what the rest of us call suburbs, housing, nice places to live, they only want to build up and in, infill housing, higher with public transit. They don't manage public transit very well. That's a story, we could go 5 hours on that. But it's not very appealing to use public transit. And of course, there's all the just basic geographic problems that it doesn't go everywhere you need to go in California. You need a car anyway. But they would prefer, for the climate, that nobody drives. So when people in the suburbs say, why are you forcing these apartments into our single family neighborhoods? Why are you raising our taxes to build these transit systems that never get completed? They don't care. This is their policy. This is their goal. And they don't care. What do they care about? They care about donations from the building trades unions. So one of the things that has stopped some of these projects from being built is that the building trades have said, well, we're going to sue you under CEQA right into the ground. You're never going to finish this unless you agree to a contract for union labor only, a project labor agreement, prevailing wage requirements, skilled and trained workforce, call it what you will. It's a requirement to use very expensive construction labor. Whether they're available or not, you may have to wait because there may not be enough of them in California who meet those union standards to work on these projects where they're mandating that you hire them. So it gets very expensive to build housing. And then what happens? Well, then you have very high rents or very high prices. And then everybody's mad about that. Well, what do they do in response to that? Well, they require more regulation. It becomes like a cartoon from the Soviet Union. They're going to mandate affordable units in a market rate building, but only a couple of them. Who gets them? We're not sure. How is this allocated? We don't know. And what is this where people who pitch a tent at the beach are entitled to a free apartment at the beach while the rest of us can't possibly afford an apartment at the beach? What are they doing They're trying to disconnect essentially effort from reward. They don't want to ration housing by price. If you don't ration housing by price in a place like California or really anywhere, if you don't ration scarce goods by price, then you're rationing by some form of government force. And that's where we are. So this golf course development, very concerning. They took this 2022 law, which AB 2011, which was supposed to be about commercial corridors and making it possible to build housing where there have been retail stores that are emptied out for whatever reason and our thriving economy. And they have amended and amended to make it fit what a developer wanted to do on that golf course. And it's very dangerous, of course, because you've got that evacuation problem with narrow streets if there's a wildfire. And they're going to build all this dense housing. I have the numbers here: 175 single family homes, multi-story, 126 apartments. And then in order to get all the lobbyists appeased, 97 affordable housing units. So this is their formula. If you do more of what they want, you get a density bonus. You can make more money with your project. Now, if you're a builder and you want to build housing, in other states, you can build housing much more easily. But in California, housing is considered bad for the planet unless it's, quote, sustainable housing. And then you get into this very abrasive situation, like we have in the Pacific Palisades, where this industry in Sacramento wants to build high density affordable housing where it was a single family neighborhood. And then people deny it. And then they want to do a bus stop. And now everybody's looking at the bus stop and saying, well, that's going to rezone all the single family parcels under SB 79. And somebody says no, and somebody says yes. And you've got these layers of laws, one after another, year after year, on top of the specific plans and all the rest of it. But the gist of the thing is they want to wipe away local resistance. That's their goal, is to take groups like this out of the discussion. That is their goal. That's what they mean when they say ministerially approved. It means there's no process, there's no hearing. They're not interested in talking to the neighbors about the impact on the neighborhood or the street or the parking or the sewers or anything.
What you're saying is ringing true, I'm afraid, to all of us. We know we had heard pretty much over a decade ago out of Sacramento that they were going to destroy single family homes because it just didn't make any sense to them that two people could live on that large of a piece of property when there's others that are in such desperate need of homes. And unfortunately, the legislatures have decided to take away that local control that we've had for our communities for ages, to be able to decide what the density is going to be, what type of properties are going to be used for what purposes. And we even find out now that with AB 2243, where they've changed the definition now of commercial corridor to be anything that's from at least 70 feet to 150 feet in width, becomes a commercial corridor. And as a commercial corridor, it doesn't matter what it was zoned at, what the other properties on the sides was zoned for. Doesn't matter what we've done to try to control our local density and our safety and our and density as far as transportation is concerned, that the builders can come in at that point and do anything they want to, whether they're commercial builders, that is, that they are commercial owners that come in, or whether they're private developers. We're going to find, I think, that a lot of places that as time goes on, if something doesn't change and our voices are not heard, that the single family homes in our neighborhoods where we're surrounded by single family homes are going to be destroyed because commercial developers can come in and buy up those properties and put up 4 and 8 apartments in some of those locations, depending upon the location to them. And it's an outrage of what they're trying to do. To think that Sacramento can, by their cookie cutter approach, decide what we should be doing in our own backyard is an outrage. And we see that going on right now with the Woodland Hills golf course, where the development there is basically disrespecting the rest of the community that's around it and placing them at potential huge safety issues if there's an evacuation needed, whether it be by fires or by other matters for that matter. And so it's becoming rather problematic. I want, if I may, before I come back to you on this one, I'd like everybody to please jot down a couple of of legislative bills to go look at. And all you have to do is just Google these, ask for a summary of them. Just, give me a summary of the following: AB 2011, AB 893, and I'm going to repeat these again: AB 2243, and SB 6. It's also SB 10. Take a look at that one as well. Take a look at SB 79 also. But each one of them, SB, back again, AB 2011, AB 893, AB 2243, and SB 6. In AB 2023, do a Google search on that one and look for commercial corridor. It'll give you the definition there. It's now been codified in the Government Code section 65912.101. How about that? It's now codified. But watch what they're doing. And that was slipped in an amendment that was done at the basically in October. And they slipped that in on what they're going to do with changing our abilities to have that local control. No CEQAs, no hearings, no public input to it. And the restrictions are rather strange. But do read through that. You'll find out what's really going on, what Sacramento is trying to do. Here's a question to you, Susan. How do we get this back? We seem to have lost a lot at this point. They've dragged us around and have basically put nooses around our neck on what's going on with strangling our voices at this stage. How do we get it back? I know, for example, with Prop 213, the protections that you're looking at with on the ballot in November, and we'll hopefully have you back at that point. We'll talk about that when it gets on the ballot, which I think it will. But what's your thought, having been around politics and having run for office yourself? How do we get this back, and how do we get our legislative people to listen to what the heck we're doing, and to take back our own control of our own neighborhoods? I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Well, one of the things you can do is support Our Neighborhood Voices at ourneighborhoodvoices.com. That's a group of people that are trying very hard to raise the money to do an initiative statewide to restore local control. They are having exactly the same conversation that we're having right now. It's Redondo Beach, it's Huntington Beach, it's areas near Pasadena, a number of local mayors, number of local officials. I've seen their presentation several times over a number of years. It's a steep climb to do that. And there's a lot of opposition to local control from these same people who want to override local control so they can build whatever they want to build, because the government won't let them build anything in outlying areas where there's no objection to it. The objection to it is, oh, the environment, the climate, whatever. So, I mean, you're not going to like this probably, but what President Trump is trying to do is to shut down this climate veto on everything that Americans want to do. He's trying to shut that down. He's trying to create affordable energy in the United States instead of trying to convert everything to running on sunshine and breezes 100%, which is never going to work.
And our transportation issues in this city specifically, I guess, just don't work. I mean, they're putting in things. They're going to redo the Orange Line here at some point too, and nobody wants to ride them. It's the safety issues and all of that, and sanitary issues, very frankly, in some of those locations too. And I don't know what the answer is to it. I mean, the buses are not intended to be restrooms, but they're turning out to be that in some areas.
It's unspeakable. What they're letting the public transit system, which is being built at billions of dollars of cost coming from sales taxes in large part in LA County, and they have allowed it to turn into a rolling hellhole.
It costs like $100 or more than $100 an hour to run those buses back and forth. And when you drive down the road and you look inside of it, for the most part, there's nobody in them. Every once in a while, we'll see it. The Orange Line's doing a little bit better, but nobody's using them.
Metro had its greatest ridership numbers in the 1980s when it was just a bus system. But then they started routing everything to construction because there's money in construction.
And
it's just like the bullet train. See, transportation is not the point. The point is real estate development. Because what they've done is they've created a situation where if you're near transit, if your property is near transit, you can get density bonuses and you can get overrides of local zoning and all kinds of things. What they've just done with SB 79 doesn't even require the transit to be built, and it's automatically rezoning anything within
You
half
need
a
to
mile
take a
from
serious look
apartment
at that.
building.
When those of you that are listening to us tonight, read through those, take a look at what's going on concerning those transportation zones and what they can do within a quarter of a mile, half a mile, or a mile on either side. That's a big swatch of property all the way through. And there's nothing to guarantee that those transportation zones will remain as that the buses will continue to run through those locations. And you can imagine if they have all this building, let's say within a quarter of a mile from one, let's say on Ventura Boulevard, for example, or on Sermon Way, that a quarter mile on each side of that, that all these high-rise buildings will all of a sudden go up that have been single-family homes before, and then all of a sudden they decide they're not going to run those buses through there because they find it's just not economical. Whatever. What happens then? Now we have all those people that are there that don't have the parking that was normally required before. Their cars are going to be, everybody's have to have cars around. Where are they going to put them at? We got that same problem running right now, I think, Susan, with Topanga. As you may know, they want to take Topanga from Mulholland all the way down to Ventura and turn that into basically apartment complexes with bonuses and reducing down the number of parking spots that they have to end up having. Dennis, I see you have your hand up. I don't want to be dominating this too much, but I get rather aggravated by all this, as I'm sure that Susan does too. Dennis, go ahead with your question, sir.
Well, I think you got me aggravated, John. That's why I got my hand up. So anyway, so Susan, I look at these state laws and I look at across the state and I do see small towns that are guilty of pushing development away completely. In other words, not accepting apartment buildings even on their main street and things like that, I'm going to throw out a few places, Pleasanton, California, Malibu, California, places under 200,000 people, right? So these laws were, I think they've been written for the guilty, but I don't think that Los Angeles, or especially Woodland Hills, is in that list of guilt. Okay, we wrote a specific plan for Warner Center to put density where it's supposed to be. Okay, where we were open-minded to 19,000 more living units in the place where we could put it and protect single-family neighborhoods as well, and everybody could live and have kumbaya, right? And what happens when you write state laws and overwrite everything, you're not taking into account the local issues. And I think that there are places, and it's not the big cities, it's the smaller towns that were resisting the housing. And some of those small towns are, like out in the suburbs of Los Angeles, even. Okay. And they just didn't want anything to be built there, even on their main streets, even in a place where it wouldn't hurt their single family neighborhoods. Okay. So what happened is they based it on San Francisco, obviously, and the senator up there and all that good stuff, right? But at the same time, Senator Weiner, right? But at the same time, we're getting hurt when we were trying to cooperate and we were trying to grow correctly.
And what did
And
you learn from that? Let's be cynical here.
no, you're
What
right.
did that experience teach you? Did
Well,
it teach you
never
that
be
it's
cooperative
only
again. No, I'm just
about
kidding.
power?
By the way,
Yeah.
Susan, just so that you know, those who are listening know, Dennis is an architect and one of our board members. Dennis worked on the specific plan for here, along with Marty and a number of other people too, working on that very, very hard for a long time. I think it's probably a decade. Worked very, very hard to come up with a great plan of what they're going to do with different geographical areas within the Woodland Hills area that can be used for different purposes, whether it be for commercial area or residential, what have you, and did a great job on that. And then that work has been now thrown back in their face at that point. Dennis has worked very hard for it. Dennis is an architect, has designed and worked with a lot of buildings that are out here in this area and throughout the entire city and other areas too. But Senate looking at it as a, I can't be that critical about what the government wants to do, but yes, I can, because they're not really representing us. Government's supposed to be doing that, and they're just not doing it. And I guess the question is, Dennis, what did you learn from it too? That's what Susan wanted to say. What did you learn from that process and now getting it thrown back in your face.
Sure, sure. So,
Do we give
you
up?
know,
Do we give
it's
up?
interesting because when I bring this up, that we were being responsible, even to our local planning department, they're changing their laws to meet state laws. And when I tell them what we did and why we did it, they said that was then, this is now. That's their response. And that is good job, but we want more. And we want to put it where you don't have a choice,
Well, we
right?
have things,
So
Dennis, like the Mulholland specific plan, which is over 25 years old, or the Dumet's
Gerard track,
the
yeah, I
George
know.
tracker,
Yeah,
and
sure.
the legislation says that those specific plans that we put in there over 25 years of age no longer apply in those areas, even though those were worked hard for. The builders had worked on that. We bought into those locations based upon what we would expect for the future is what can and cannot be built in our particular areas to protect our own investments in those homes. And that's being dragged away from us. And if people out there that are listening to us are not upset about this, you better get upset about it because we're going to have to do something, or otherwise they're going to take everything away from us. And all there's going to be is nothing more than just tenant buildings all over the place. They're going to be 4, 8, 10 stories tall with no transportation, no parking. They're going to block all the roads so we get out of our cars, and they're going to get us in transportation that we don't want and just don't want to use. We just it's
John, I need to mention something else though that's kind of on the other side of this. And Susan mentions this, and that is, they're against sprawl, right? They're against like, hey, why don't we just keep the suburbs going because everybody really wants a single family home, and there's still a big market for that, and that's the goal. And if you have more of them, then they'll be more affordable, right? Especially if they're out further. Okay, but unfortunately, we've done this a little bit ourselves because we've protected the end of Victory, okay, the Amundsen Ranch. We've protected the Mulholland, up by Mulholland, the Conservancy land, right? We People can't build what you're talking about as far as sprawl goes because we protected it. Now that is a local issue, right? That's a local. Obviously, it wasn't Viragosa and our past president, Gordon Murley, were very involved in the Amundsen Ranch property, okay, and getting it protected. But what I'm saying to you is there's a balance there, and sometimes, do we want to give up that open land and let the sprawl go, right?
Well,
So
it
there,
I
doesn't
think
have to
Dennis,
go, it doesn't have to go everywhere, but there's a lot of
sure,
land between Santa Clarita and Stockton that nobody's allowed to build on
that's right.
because
yeah,
it's sprawl. And
yeah,
that's not the Amundsen Ranch. That's a whole different thing. So there's a very small percentage. You probably know it better than I do. What's like 10% of the whole state of California is developed.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's not to say that you should put up apartments in Yosemite, which would be the cartoon way to say, oh, well, this argument's terrible if she wants to build apartments in
Of
Yosemite.
course,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
That's
important
what they
for us
would
to
say. But
it's
but
important to protect those
if you don't balance the needs of housing, if you're holding up housing for climate numbers, for greenhouse gas emissions numbers, which in some ways are fictional anyway. By the way, did you know that
yeah,
when they talk about our greenhouse gas reductions, they don't count wildfires? Should we talk about that?
yeah.
Wildfires are calculated separately for greenhouse gas emissions so that it doesn't ruin the curve. And they don't they don't manage the land the way the land was managed decades ago for fire prevention or for fire suppression or for fire minimization. They don't do that anymore in the same way for environmental reasons. It's what happened in the Palisades. They were protecting the milk vetch plant, and so they didn't bulldoze fire breaks to protect those houses. And look what happened. So if they're going to do that, the first place you're going to see the problem is from the insurance companies. And they were the canary in the coal mine. They started canceling policies in these zip codes, in Woodland Hills, in Chatsworth, in the Palisades.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
started canceling policies. Why? I would love to see the correspondence with the governor's office. I'm working on seeing if there's a way to get that because I know that they warned the governor, they warned the government that there were problems with fire prevention in California, and
Why do
they
you?
were the canary in the coal mine to cancel
Can
those
can I mention one
policies.
more thing, John, before I
Yep,
let before
yep,
I be
go
quiet,
ahead.
and then I'll like sit on the side here.
You're good.
So what we did in Warner Center, right? And we concentrated and we look, okay, you want that density, it is needed, and here's where we want to put it. There are other places where you could do that in the valley. Okay, and I don't mean to, if anybody's on the listening in from Northridge, but or from Chatsworth, but there's industrial zones over there where you could create satellites and you could create density, and you don't have to put an apartment building next to my house. Okay, so there's smart ways to do this, but they won't let us because the
Dennis,
state already took over,
Dennis,
right?
with the Woodland Hills Golf Course, the project that's there, that project is something that normally is built, if you will, by freeways of other locations, not where they want to put it at. Am I off base on that, or is that what your experience has been as
No,
well?
I've done projects exactly like that project, okay, with a mixture of townhomes and four-story apartment buildings and surrounded by asphalt, I guess it really is, but not. It is in old industrial areas that need regenification, if you want to call it that, I guess, but or next to a freeway or in an apartment area or along a real commercial
That's right.
a street.
Just because you want to say
You
it's a
know,
commercial zone on Canoga doesn't mean it actually is.
Correct. No, that's where it's ridiculous. And I believe, and I'll be quiet after this, promise, that even some of our politicians have admitted they didn't understand that when they were voting for development along commercial zones, that it wasn't the old Sears building on Main Street, or something like that. That it was going to be in an area like the golf course. They did not realize that
Now, that's a
when
letter
they were
from
voting.
Henry. That's a Henry Stern letter, if you will.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention his name.
I don't mind. It's okay. Blame
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Okay, Marty, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, can you hear me first of all?
Yeah, we can go.
Okay. Um, the problems that I'm seeing are that there's this mad rush to build more housing and quote affordable housing. And you can look at it on paper, but nobody wants to look at it in reality. And the reality is you've got businesses, huge ones and small ones, fleeing Southern California. We've got empty stores up and down all of these quote main streets. We've got
Yeah.
mall after mall that's being closed and turned and torn down. Where the hell do they think these people are going to be working? They're not all going to be on a computer. And there's no logical sense of, well, we got to house all these people. So you're housing people that, number one, probably shouldn't even be here in Southern California in a market that's this expensive. Number two, we're losing a lot of industries. We're losing insurance companies. We've lost the entire aerospace business here in the valley. We've lost tons and tons of film projects and places to film and studios and if Ellison manages to get his hands on Warner Brothers, we're going to be losing even more in that sector. And every other state in the union is coming after that film business because it's very profitable. They don't have to build much for it, and you can shoot it right there in Atlanta or South Carolina or Montana or wherever the hell you want to shoot it. None of that seems to have permeated the heads of the people that are in Sacramento. All they do is they follow this mantra of we need more housing. It has to be affordable. Well, you can build all the housing you want, but if there's no place for people to work and there's nothing for them to do or get around, what the hell are you building? You're building a slum. And believe me, I grew up in New York, very close to Manhattan. I saw that crap happen in Queens. I saw it happen in Brooklyn. They're still trying to fight to get away from all of that. This is just madness. And we keep sending people to Sacramento who don't have a clue. And we got a representative there, and I'm going to name him because I know you guys don't want to do it politically. But Jesse has been a disaster. Jesse Gabriel should not be in Sacramento. He shouldn't have a government job at all. He doesn't know what the hell's going on, and he doesn't care. He has had 5 opportunities to speak to the people that are here, not just to the who, but to the entire section of people who can tune in, and he asks him questions, and he's Welsh on every single one of them. And he's not the only one. There are other people like that.
I guess,
Hey, you guys, let's not forget our guest.
yeah, I'm back on.
Oh,
Susan,
that's okay. I'm
the-
fascinated. Keep going.
the question that comes back on is, what do we do with that? And by the way, just so we're clear, our organization does not endorse any particular candidate for office at all. We're not political in that sense. We're political only in watching what goes on as far as development in our community, and that becomes very, very important, I think, to all of us. But Susan, we start looking at what's going on up in Sacramento, what's happening with our representatives. For example, as you may know, that Henry Stern had done a letter when he said, "I didn't realize, didn't appreciate this commercial corridor really was going to have the impact, and is as broad as what it turns out to be." We're looking at that legislation. Where are we missing as a local community to get stuff done with this? Do you have any suggestions for us again with how we can begin to make sure that our local people are actually working? I'll give an example and see what you can fill this in. There doesn't appear to be a coalition of legislators from Southern California that are working against that machine that's up there in Sacramento. It appears that with Weiner and some of the others that are up there, they're just running roughshod over all of our legislators that are down here, and nobody's able to get anything done unless they say it can be done. What has been your experience with what's happening up in Sacramento in regards to that split between Northern California and Southern California? And by the way, if any of those listeners out there, you've got some questions too, and even comments, put your hands up. We're happy to take you. Susan, where are we with that?
Well, if you look at SB 79, this was a very interesting political situation. SB 79 is the bill that authorizes the rezoning automatically of properties, single-family homes that are within half a mile of a transit stop as defined. When it was first introduced, it applied in every county, and it applied to bus stops that had frequent service. So you could have a bus schedule that gave you frequent service for just long enough to rezone all these parcels, and they would all be within half a mile of the bus stop. They would all be multi-story apartment buildings or eligible to become it. Well, this was quite upsetting to a number of people, and there were amendments to the bill. And the amendments to the bill said, well, all right, not just a bus stop, but it has to be a dedicated bus lane, which is not much better because a bucket of paint and a stripe and you've got a dedicated bus lane. Doesn't take a whole lot of work to do that. Then they went and they started cutting counties out of it. So by the time they finished SB 79, it was 3 counties in Southern California, including this one, and 3 counties in the Bay Area. And everybody else who voted for that thing, including some Republicans who were in the Central Valley, they weren't affected by it because it didn't apply where their people were, and they voted for it. And I don't think that's great. The mayor of Los Angeles came out against it. The city council voted against it. The city attorney wrote a scathing letter saying it was going to cost billions of dollars because these single-family neighborhoods don't have the infrastructure to support multi-story apartment buildings, sewer, water, power, all the rest of it. And who's going to pay for that? And there's no answer. Who's going to pay for that? The whole city of Los Angeles was against it. And after it passed just recently, the County Board of Supervisors said they were going to try to delay it in some way because why? People were resisting the development of transit stations. No kidding. No kidding. They created community opposition to transit stations. And let me tell you something from my Howard Jarvis folder. Proposition 218, Section 3, is the initiative power to repeal taxes. And all you need is 5% of the number of people who voted for governor, any candidate, in the general election in the last race for governor. So currently there is a city effort to repeal the city business tax. That's a Prop 218 Section 3 initiative. It has a lower signature threshold than a conventional initiative just to write a law in the city of Los Angeles. About a third of what, I think it's like 150 versus roughly 46,000 signatures for the tax repeal. So keep an eye on that. I don't know if they'll take that all the way to the ballot or make a deal, but that is something that is available to angry taxpayers, angry people who are upset about transit. it's possible to repeal the 4 half-cent taxes in Los Angeles County that fund transit, or one of them, or 2 of them, or reduce them. It's possible to do that with an initiative. That's a taxpayer protection from the 1996 initiative, Prop 218. So there's that. And there's the neighborhood, our neighborhood voices, which would strip the state of the ability to override local zoning. And there's the traditional, we aren't going to vote for you anymore, kind of argument where you fund candidates who will represent you to go up to Sacramento and fight aggressively for the rights of the people who live here and not the people that they're imagining will live here when there are no jobs for them to do, which is a very good point. That, what are we building this housing for? And the answer, unfortunately, is we're building the housing because developers have donated and unions that build the housing have donated and environmental groups that don't want sprawl have donated. And that's enough. They don't really care about the voters.
You mentioned earlier that there's apparently something coming up on the June ballot with some taxes. What's that all about? What you would be watching out for? As I understand from previous conversations that this appears to be something that they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes with. What's up?
Yes, the county has put a sales tax on the June ballot. The Board of Supervisors voted 4-1. Catherine Barger voted against it. But this is a 0.5% sales tax increase for 5 years. They're saying it's temporary. They're never really temporary. They're always reauthorized. But
They
for the
say
moment,
nothing lasts as long as a temporary bill.
quite true. So this is a 0.5% sales tax. There's a bill in Sacramento to authorize them to go above the cap again, because there's a cap on what local sales taxes can be, and it's 2% on top of the 7.25% state rate. How do they get to where we are? They keep getting these special bills that authorize exemptions from the cap to go above it. So that would take the sales tax to 10.25% in the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles, higher in many cities that are already above that. It's a general tax, and they're selling it as if it's a special tax for healthcare services. They're saying this is going to backfill the cuts from Washington in our Medi-Cal system, and we have to have it because we need it for healthcare. And they've got this big detailed spending plan for healthcare. But guess what? It's optional. It's completely optional. They can legally spend that money on anything, pay raises, pensions, wallpaper, anything. And they could design new websites with it. They could rent limousines with it. They can do whatever they want legally. So there's a 9-member or 16-member board of oversight built into this tax increase to make sure that they're spending the money correctly. But no matter what they spend it on, it's legal. So what are they going to say? That is the trick. And it's pretty despicable. Why are they doing it? Because if they say it's a special tax and the money is dedicated to that purpose, it needs a 2/3 vote. That's in the Constitution. If it's a general tax, it needs a simple majority vote, much easier to get that. And if they didn't put it on the ballot at the county supervisor board, then what would have happened is this group that's backing it, which is the healthcare unions and the healthcare industry, they would have done a citizens initiative tax increase, and they would have been able to do it with a simple majority through that loophole, which we intend to close in November, but they would have gotten in ahead of it. So that's what's going on. It's very tricky. It's just another tax increase. It could go for paying those ridiculous settlements that they've agreed to, $4 billion for sex abuse claims with no names, no witnesses, no records, just lawyers.
That's one of the difficulties we have with propositions generally, is that the descriptions that are placed on them have nothing to do with the content generally. They're overly broad. They don't really get down into where the details are. And it's only through discussions like with you and others that we're able to find out some of the details that are there and to be wise. I know there's some people who say we want everybody to be able to vote on things. Well, I think really it's kind of a little bit different. We really want people who are educated as to what they're voting on to vote. Otherwise, you're just voting almost like a popularity contest because something you've read sounds nice to you, and you're going to feel like you're doing something good for the community when in fact you may be actually slashing your own throat without really recognizing it. So
well, in defense of the voters, it must be said that there's quite an industry in fooling people. There's a lot of money to be made in writing stuff that will absolutely fool people, even smart people, even people with 2 or 3 degrees who are accustomed to reading complex documents. These things are written in a
Well,
way to confuse people.
and another bit of education, I think, for our listeners too, is tell us what you know about the people who gather those signatures. Are they people who just have got the best interest of the community at heart? Are they just paid people that come in from other states and it's just a business and they're going to try to sell you on anything so they get a signature on a piece of paper so they make some money? What's the story with those
Well, there is
petitions?
that. There is that. It's you need a lot of signatures in a very short period of time to get something on the ballot. And volunteers can do a great job, but typically volunteers do 25% and paid signature gathering does 75%. That's what I've been hearing in my travels through this space, that mostly they end up paying because it's a lot of work to stand out there and talk to people and get their signature, and they're paid $5, $7, $13, $14 a signature depending on the demand, and they work very hard. They come in from all over the country. They are people who are kind of itinerant and they're working for, freelance or short-term employment. Um, some of them might be shady. Some of them are, maybe just people who are working some
You're,
other job and they need to supplement it.
you're going
So
to get
there's
that with
a wide
anybody, I
range.
think. And the key is don't necessarily listen to what somebody's trying to sell you on the sidewalk. Read it. Read what's
Right.
there. Read what's going on. Ask questions. Don't just take a look at the title to it and say, geez, that sounds nice. I might as well go ahead and put that up. And it can create all kinds of problems. Looking for questions from the audience. People got any questions or comments about things that are going on. I'm concerned with the situation, obviously, with the Woodland Hills Golf Course because it's in our area, and I think it's really smacking us in the face as to what can happen with Sacramento if we don't really watch what they're doing. They can sneak stuff in at the last minute and change things and create all kinds of difficulties that we're not really happy about. So that's kind of not what we kind of really expected to have happen, frankly. So
Well, on
somebody
that
has
you have to blame your representatives. As citizens, it's not really possible to read the fine print of every bill and every amendment to every bill that's
that
flying through.
is true. Somebody's got their hands raised. Who's got their hands up? Go ahead and speak if you can. Maybe you can't. Uh, I don't see who is muted and not muted at this point on hands being up, but please, if you got some questions or comments, let us know. Shelley's got a huge amount of, Shelley did it again. Susan's got a huge amount of.
Oh, it's JT. Right at the
JT
top.
has his hand up.
Oh, JT, go ahead.
And Robert Boyle. Mhm.
JT, go ahead. Are you unmuted, JT? Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. JT, you should be allowed. There you go. JT, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, hi, my name is Jamie, and I am actually heading up a newly formed group that formed as a result of the Woodland Hills Country Club development. And it's the Woodland Hills Landwise Alliance. And I have spent the last 2 months in extensive conversations with people up in Sacramento. And I will say one thing about Jesse Gabriel's office. They did open some doors and connected me with some people. I had Zoom meetings with Buffy Wick's legislative people to specifically talk about AB 2011 and AB 2243. And it was very interesting because they were very convinced and very firm that their bill, especially AB 2011, was not intended for a neighborhood like the Girard Tract. It was intended for those, commercial corridors. And it was originally drafted and brought to the table to address a 44-mile stretch of the El Camino Real up in Buffy Wicks's district that had become sort of run down and dilapidated with a lot of empty strip malls. They didn't even know what 2243 was, and they had drafted part of it. And through talking and just kind of connecting the dots, I kind of figured out, I'm not going to name all the names, but that 2243 was indeed specifically drafted for the Woodland Hills Country Club project. The Political Action Committee that drafted the legislation is called BOMA, and it's a huge international commercial development pack. And they have various political ties to Wicks's office, to the developer, even to the land use consultant who's working on the project. So we don't know definitively, but we're pretty sure that, there's a bill that's now starting to blow up in other parts of the state, which is, 2243, that was drafted for our neighborhood. So it became obvious that we didn't have enough time because of the fast track ministerial review to get legislation changes done, because that takes usually a full year of the calendar cycle. So we did find a technicality. The only thing that really stood out was this definition of vacant. And when I talked to WICS's ledge directors, they thought, vacant wasn't defined. And I said, well, that depends on where you live and what your planning department says about it. And our planning department did, kind of have a definition of it. So long story short, and I give Henry Stern's office huge credit for this, because they worked with me very tirelessly and spent hours with me on the phone. And what that resulted in was them setting up a meeting with some people from planning, from Blumenfield's office, their office, and I believe the city attorney. And it happened a couple weeks ago. And as a result of that, Blumenfield issued this new motion that went to Plum yesterday and was adopted by the Plum Committee. But it was tricky because we couldn't define anything in terms of, changing a law, because then you get into vesting issues with the developers. So Blumenfield's motion basically said he was issuing an instruction to the planning department to define, and it was very tight, define golf courses in fire zones as vacant. And being vacant gives us some of the controls back, and it gives us our specific plan back. And hopefully will lead us into full sequel review. But it was phenomenal to me how invested in YIMBY that WICS and Wiener are. And in talking to some of the legislative directors up there, I found out that, it's not entirely their fault. They have been, a lot of them have actually put bills forward to WICS and Wiener to try to temper some of this legislation, this really heavy-handed stuff, and get local controls restored. And I will tell you flat out, Scott Wiener refused to take a lot of those bills to the floor, and he buried them. So this is the kind of garbage that's going on up in Sacramento. And I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's what it's doing. It's going to create a very dystopian environment here in California. And it's going to take I don't know what. There's some stuff I'll send you, Shelley, if you're interested. I came across a video where 2 years ago, where they were discussing the implementation of AB 2011, and there must have been over 100 people on this Zoom, and it was land use consultants, land use attorneys, commercial architects, and WICS's legislative staff. And you could hear from the conversations they were having that this was just all big development, all big money. They were going to work the legislation. It was the labor unions, and the labor unions realized they weren't making money by putting all these union rules into the legislation. They were getting 0% of nothing. So then they backed off of that and revised the bills to say, oh, they don't have to be union construction workers. They just have to be paid a fair wage. So it's kind of like, it's like they're throwing spaghetti at the wall, and we're all suffering because of it. And AB 2243, I was told, like I said, is already blowing up in other areas because it should never have been passed or enacted.
This is an issue that crosses party lines, demographic lines. I was in Inglewood talking to people about SB 79. They were very upset, particularly about the fact that these buildings don't have any parking spaces. Because if you live on a street that happens to be half a mile from where someone put a dot on a map that's going to one day be a transit stop, and you're rezoned for 7-story apartment buildings with no parking spaces, you now live on a street that could become a permanent construction site with hammering and sawing and demolition sounds continuously as one house after another is redeveloped into an apartment building, as people are parking everywhere they can because they're still going to have cars because the transit is a dot on the map that's planned. And that was enough to rezone it. This is disgusting what they're doing. And they're doing it, as you said, for money, for campaign contributions, for
Mm-hmm.
power. And they're absolutely selling out the people of California. It is a very volatile political issue, and it's going to have a backlash. I can't tell you exactly when, but the
Yeah.
pendulum swings.
I think it's starting. I think the backlash is starting. I think people like you speaking out, what we're doing to speak out, it was very telling that a lot of these legislators up there, both in the Assembly and the Senate, have been trying to temper this. And, even the motion that we put through yesterday, um, they had to write it so specifically so as not to, God forbid, offend anyone.
Well, not to get the city sued is probably what
Yeah,
they're.
not to get them sued, but also not to upset the apple cart because this has to go to the full city council, and then it has to go to Karen Bass.
Yeah.
And Karen Bass can veto it, and you don't know what her interests are, anybody else's interests are. So, but what do communities do when they're not in our situation where you have something so specific like a golf course in a very high fire hazard zone? What if you don't have that? Then where's your technicality and what are you going to be able to find to get some of your local controls back?
I don't think you can. I think this ship has sailed for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just like the ADU law, which said anyone can turn a garage into an apartment and it's ministerially approved, and ADUs in the backyard, and the lot split law. Most people haven't taken advantage of the lot split, probably because they got to look at what the property tax bill would be if they did all that new construction at today's prices, and probably not as many lot splits as they thought there would be for their so-called gentle density, but they are intentionally trying to destroy single family neighborhoods. There
Yeah.
are YIMBY people who think it's not a good use of land. They don't like anything about it. They think we're all a bunch of Romanovs who should be shot in the basement. And I
Yeah.
don't agree with that. I don't think we're Romanovs, and I don't think we should be shot in the basement.
No, and what people need to realize, YIMBY is not this altruistic organization. YIMBY is big tech and big development. That's who funds YIMBY and the construction labor unions.
Right.
So they've weaponized the NIMBY. NIMBY started back in the 70s, to describe people who were protesting against, things like nuclear waste and chemical waste in their neighborhoods. And it's been weaponized in the last decade or so, and used against people like us who are just offending their neighborhoods and their
Mhm.
quality of life and their choices for how they want to live.
And what is wrong with that? What is wrong with wanting to have a house with a yard, with a driveway for the basketball hoop for the kids? What is wrong with that? Nothing
Nothing.
is wrong
And
with that.
Nothing.
and for a lot, that becomes the retirement, if you will,
Right.
nest egg for a lot of
That's
people
right.
that can be used
Buying
later on.
buying
JT,
property is a tremendous wealth builder for generational wealth,
JT,
for the
if
kids.
if you could
Jamie.
send me a
Yeah.
copy of that video, JT, I'd appreciate we could put that up on the website too and let people take a look at
Yeah.
that. I think that would be really good. I understand the motion that came out of Plum actually didn't have a vote on it, which is merely a recommendation from the chairman. And I think there's three different provisions on that. Is that where we are with that?
It went to Plum yesterday. They said it was adopted, and so now our understanding is it's going to go to City Council
You got it.
for everybody to vote on, and then if they adopt it, it'll go to Karen Bass.
Sounds good. Robert, you had
Yeah.
your hand up too. You have a question for us or comment?
Yes, I
Thank you,
do.
JT.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the time and attention everyone on here has given to this matter. Regarding the golf course, can we get a battle plan? Maybe some bullet points of who do we write? What do we vote for? What do we vote against? Or anything else that we can do to stop this?
I think you could probably write to Karen Bass and say you don't want a second Palisades fire incident, and that'll get her attention. That would probably work.
JT, you've got an idea too. Go ahead.
Yeah, we actually have a petition on our website. It's woodlandhillsla.org. And there's a page on there you can go to the home page and it'll say sign the petition. Our plan is to present that petition to Karen Bass We want to get as many signatures on it as we can. And we have hired an attorney. We have named Jamie Hall, who represents communities with issues like this. He's a land use attorney, but he's a community advocate, as opposed to working for big development. So we are working on this very aggressively.
And JT will be happy to come as the Woodland Hills homeowners, as we've told before, but the other organizations that are out there to come alongside and help where we possibly can as well on this one.
Yeah, I'll send you an email. I would love
Please
to
do.
connect with you more on this.
Got it. Robert,
Thank you,
go ahead.
Jamie.
Anything further, Robert? Go ahead.
Well, just, is it possible to put something on the website that we can, I mean, we wrote this down, we took notes right now, my wife and I, but is it possible to put something on the website that we can make sure we sign the petitions and we do whatever we can do?
Yeah, we will. We'll have a board meeting this coming Monday night, and our board members, I'm sure, will authorize us to go ahead and put some things up on the website along those lines. Just so you know, since we're a membership organization, we want to be careful about not just myself deciding, just going off on doing things. We have the board will take a look at it, make sure that we're doing things so we're all on the same step with that. Dennis, you got a comment? Go ahead, sir. You're gonna.
Yeah, sure. Just a quick one.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm the vice president of this organization. A group of us met with the mayor's staff last week, and we walked through the possible arguments against 211, AB 211, and just so you know, there were representatives of the neighborhood council there. There were representatives of the neighborhood around the golf course that were selected, and we talked to the mayor's staff about this for about an hour. They gave us, some time. We asked them can you put it in an emergency order like you did in the Palisades, because it's a high fire hazard area and things like that. So like a couple of things to just give you an example. There's some definitions in that law about being adjacent to urban uses and having the perimeter of the site, the ratio of urban uses around us, the site being 75% and things like that. We got into the weeds, okay, with them because we were trying to find legal issues that they could grab onto to turn this thing away, frankly, or to open it up so that at least it would go through the public hearing process and the CEQA process. So I just wanted to mention it to some of the folks that were just talking that we have been in communication. The WHO has been in communication with the mayor's office, and we will continue to do that. And the neighborhood council has been very involved in this as well. So.
Yeah, as you may know, I think that Susan will probably verify this too. A lot of the work that goes on in this is done somewhat behind the scenes. It's it's not necessarily done at the public hearings, but yet before we get to those public hearings. So all of us are working together. We're here to coordinate with other groups around JT, your group, and some of the other groups are out there too. I've been on vacation for a period of time, and some of our members have too. So we're back in the saddle. This whole thing got dropped on us while I was back east during Thanksgiving, and it came up just right before Thanksgiving. They do that stuff when you see things dropping on like a Friday before Thanksgiving, a Friday before Christmas time or holidays. There's usually something up, and they don't want you to particularly know exactly what's going on. Robert,
hey, John, I just want to mention something because it really has to do with some of the things. I read Susan's articles all the time, by the way, about
good job.
While we were in this meeting, there's a point to where you got to be careful that you're not being placated, or they're not just checking off a box and saying, okay, we met with them, So I'm looking to Susan maybe for a little bit of how she may have experience with those kinds of things as well. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that you got to be careful about that, and you also got to be careful about not ranting and sticking to facts. So anyway, that's where.
It's a very challenging environment. It's not just happening to Woodland Hills, it's happening throughout the state. Huntington Beach tried to go to the Supreme Court over these issues and were turned away. And then the Attorney General was gloating at them. And they're just trying to protect their neighborhood. They build housing, but they don't want to build housing everywhere to meet these arbitrary RENA numbers that the state is enforcing when they were originally guidelines and now they're mandates. And, there's a subway going through Beverly Hills on Wilshire, and they're going to try to upzone neighborhoods there. When people don't know this is happening, but when it starts, when the first jackhammer arrives at the neighbor's house, there's going to be a political backlash throughout the state over this whole thing that's been coming for a long time. And SB 79 is the crowning jewel of the whole thing.
We're just watching the beginning of this swell that I think that's going to go on with that. Robert, I want to make sure we got your comments in before I move on to Jonah. Anything else, Robert?
No, I think you did. I'll just look forward to whatever the board decides and look forward to that.
Jonah, go ahead. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
I can't hear you. Try again.
Can you hear me now? No?
I can hear you just barely.
Just barely.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I'll fix my microphone later.
That is better.
Hopefully. Okay. Maybe there. I was just wondering, this whole country club development seems too clever by half when we still have the Rocketdyne facility area that could, be a large number of affordable housing, dense units available. It doesn't seem like they're attacking the, area of greatest opportunity first. It's just that, they were able to find this loophole for a country club. Is there, just in terms of countering the NIMBYism claim, like you had mentioned about the whole Warner Center development project already including a large number of housing, what's the potential for the Rocketdyne facility?
I wrote about the Rocketdyne facility quite a long time ago when there was a development proposed that was going to be like very, very dense. And that's a historic site where the engines for the Apollo program that went to the moon were built. And much like the Santa Susana site, when they were doing things like that in the 1960s, they were not really very careful about what they did with chemicals and other things that got into the soil and created toxic risks with the water table and various other environmental problems, because it was the Cold War and it was the 60s and people didn't pay attention to that priorities. So they went to the moon, and the site is not really, as I understand it, it's not really eligible for housing. Is that right?
That is correct.
It could be
Correct.
there could be some uses for it, but you can't just raise children on that site.
Yeah.
Tough stuff no matter what.
Thank you.
JT, there's some requests for some information about the actual name for your website. Can you unmute yourself? What's the actual site?
It's Woodland Hills LA.org.
I just looked that up and I wasn't able to find it. So it's a full Woodland Hills.
Yeah, it's full Woodland Hills, and then the letter L and the letter A.org.
Okay, so that others can take a look and get to that.
Yeah, we've got a lot of information on there. Our petition is on
I've
there.
got you. It does show up now at this point. And if I may, I'll even it just so that we're clear on it. I will go ahead and
Sign the petition.
we'll go ahead and take a look at this. I'm assuming this is the site. Yes.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. So this is it's Woodland Hills LA.org, and there's information that's there. We'll take a look at that. We'll end up maybe posting a link to you so everybody can take a look at that as well.
Wow,
That would be
great work. Great work, Jamie.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I want to connect with you guys more. This is going to take a big group effort.
I think that's a fair statement, and I think that the group that's listening has got to really understand that. And we need as many members for our organization as we possibly can. Again, numbers is what really counts when we get down to you. Talk about the petitions, the numbers of people that sign those petitions, get the mayor's office or anybody else to basically take a look at it. So keep that in mind. It becomes very important on that. So JT, keep up the good work with that, and let's make sure that this stuff ends up ends up happening. That's really the bottom line.
Yeah, thank you.
Something else that you can leverage a little bit is this is an election year. There is a competitive primary in June, which is really in May because of mail balloting going out May 2nd or May 4th. So you can ask candidates who are running for mayor where they are on this, and you can pressure them more than you can in an off year because they might be more sensitive to how
Well,
how
I
that
know that
appears to voters.
I know that Tim Gasper is online with us tonight. I know he met with I believe with Bob and some others that were meeting concern this particular issue. I don't know if Tim's got anything to add from what that meeting was all about, but I think that your comment about staying on with our representatives, those that are running for office, stay on them too, so that they are going to be able to make commitments and then hold them to those commitments, because it's without that going on, it can be really pretty much a problem. Tim, I see that you are there and you're unmuted if you've got something you can add into that.
Sure, sure. Thank you for having me. And Bob, this conversation is amazing, and it's frustrating to hear it all because we're seeing sort of how the sausage is made. But I'll tell you, from running for office for the last year, I've seen it up close, and the voters come last in regard to who gets listened to by the folks that are in office right now. So the one thing that I'll add is, you can see where contributions come from if you go to the city ethics website. And so before you meet with any elected official or anyone running for office, I would take a look and see where the money's coming from. And just because somebody makes a contribution doesn't mean they're going to have influence over a candidate, but I do think you have to ask the question. So if somebody takes money from BOMA, for example, you need to ask a question and say, have you had conversations with them around what their plans are, and have you made promises to them? Because you need to put folks on the spot. I think that was a really good point. Now is the time when you have leverage while these folks are actually running for office. I think that's very true. So great conversation, and I think it's groups like this that are going to be able to actually make some headway, and I think we'll be listened to.
Tim, did you find that in the meeting that you had with Bob and the other group that there seemed to be some focus, if you will, on what might be able to be done concerning this, or is it just basically everybody's gathering information at this point?
No, I think there were some ideas that were discussed that do have, I'm hoping, is some real potential to be a solution. I wish I could say, and I think there's a number of folks that are on this call that were there, I wish I could say I saw something that looked like a great solution that we'd be able to go after right away to get this thing stopped. And I don't want to blow smoke. I didn't see that. I think getting the property defined as vacant land would be fantastic. So I think the potential is there. I know that Bob's working his tail off to do anything he can to stop this development from happening. And I know that's the case. And so I do think that we should all be hopeful in that regard. But I didn't see anything that I thought was a slam dunk, but potential.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Susan, the donations that come in when you're running for office, you haven't run for it. How much of a problem is that with people expecting that they're just going to have access, but they're going to have control? Do we see that? Is that something that, as Tim has indicated, we should really look at who those donors are and begin to follow some of those money trails?
The money is all over the place. It's not just the direct contributions to the candidates, which have a contribution limit on them and don't look like they would be enough to sway anybody's vote. It's also the independent expenditures. So you'll see large entities in politics like the California Teachers Association and the SEIU and probably BOMA and other organizations, and rightfully so. Their financial interests are at stake in all of these legislative decisions. And so what they do is they form independent expenditure committees, which do not coordinate with the candidates, but they make a huge difference because they can buy mail, television commercials, all of that. And the candidate doesn't necessarily know, probably knows, doesn't necessarily know who's spending money for them. It's you can't get the money out of politics. When the government has too much power, money will find a way to the people who make those decisions.
So when the flyers come out to us, look at who is claiming it's from them and see who it's from, whether it's from the candidate or one of these outside PAC groups, basically.
Right. And they can also spend against a candidate. So sometimes you see someone will send you something about the opponent of the candidate that they favor. So it's not difficult to track the money, but it's difficult to do anything about it when you see it. It's a
And we're
lot of
coming,
paperwork for the candidates. It's a lot of headaches, and ultimately, it doesn't change the outcome. There's also behested payments, which local candidates and state candidates, office holders, not candidates, can do. Behested payments mean that they ask someone for money for a legislative, governmental, or charitable purpose. And this can be to a nonprofit organization that's run by one of their family members. And it is totally legal, no contribution limit for someone who is in power, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the mayor, to pick up the phone, call someone with business before the government, ask them to make a donation of perhaps millions of dollars, and all they have to do is fill out a form disclosing it, and it's totally legal. Now, what is that? Is that extortion? Is that bribery? Is that some sort of combination of the two? It's none of those things. It's legal in California. So there is a lot of influence. But at the bottom line, when candidates get nervous, when office holders get nervous, is when they're hurt in the polling. And they're hurt in the polling when people are out there talking about what they're doing and convincing the neighbors that it's not good. So it makes a big difference when you put out a yard sign for the opponent of a candidate who's giving you a hard time. It makes a big difference when you knock on doors or hand out flyers or door hangers or just comment in a letter to the editor, or just generally at meetings like this, make it known who you support and who you don't and why. That can have a big impact in local races.
Ali, you've got your hand up. You're unmuted. Go ahead. Question.
Yeah, sorry. It's I spoke before. It's Allie's husband
Okay,
speaking.
it's yes, I recall. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ali's husband.
So one of the things is all of these ABs have one thing in common, and that's that they're signed by our governor. So the governor's race is around the corner. Let's be very mindful about who we're voting for and where they stand on things. This whole thing about development and NIMBY and YIMBY, I think that the next governor is going to have quite a bit of an impact on it moving forward. And, here's our opportunity to start fixing California.
It can all be fixed. It's all man-made trouble that we're having, and it can all be fixed. And the interesting thing is that to the extent that they do this to reduce greenhouse gases, if they stop doing it, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen at all. The planet will go on exactly as it's going on. Nothing will change. What California is doing has no effect except to, quote, show leadership. How much are we influencing what they do in China, India, Germany? I don't think that much. I don't think anybody's following. And we're paying a lot for gasoline, for electricity, for water, which has the cost of electricity built into it because it's pumped around the state with electric pumps. All of these things are raising the cost of living in California. And then this mindset that we can't build housing if it's, quote, sprawl, we can't build single family homes in outlying areas, is just, I think it is just cruelty to the next generations to do that to them, to create a situation where they're never going to be able to afford a house because we're not building them. And then you go online and you see these various YIMBY commentators who are probably paid to be so nasty, but they're like in the kill everybody over 60 kind of mindset. Is get them out of their houses. They're in our housing stock. What is that? Well, that's the sound of scarcity. That's the sound of what you have in a collectivist society where you're not letting people pursue their individual well-being. You're blocking them for some group reason from pursuing their individual best life. And
Ali's husband, go ahead. You had apparently you had some more information. Go ahead.
No, I just one of the other things is if you look at where California is headed with our green energy, where Los Angeles is headed with green energy is the absolute most expensive energy there is. And if you look at other places and what they're doing for power and for water, they're not going in the same direction as California, and they're just more affordable. And so we have the middle classes fleeing the state because they can't afford to live here.
I want to let you know that Eve has just mentioned to us that Woodland Hills Neighborhood Collective has got also a whole bunch of information on their website too. JT, you had your hand up, and go ahead.
Yeah, I just, it was just one more of a comment about, when you were talking about politicians and who to vote for. And, throughout this whole process of dealing with Sacramento and all these politicians, it just became very clear that, people think the political spectrum is linear. And I really realized it's not. When you lean too far to the left or too far to the right, it's like the spectrum starts to bend and it becomes more of an ellipse, and you end up in the same place of crazy with bad legislation and bad governance. And I would just encourage people, when you're looking at candidates, stop leaning into these, like the soundbite hysteria, and take a solid look at people and, try to get back to the center. There's something for everybody in the center. But to go to these extremes, it just leads to nothing that's good for anybody.
I think that's wise for all of us to take to heart on that. We're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour, and we've had, I think, very interesting discussion on this. I hope it's been enlightening to the group that's online. The people that are online with us now, you're a good core group that needs to be gathering as much information as you can to give out to your neighbors and others, because this is something that most of us just don't have time for. We're caught up with our lives, with work, with our children, with trying to find out how we're going to do things, 2 jobs, and running around it. And then the legislators end up doing this type of stuff to us, and then we get stuck in trying to figure out how do we get ourselves out of this thing. So keep that in mind. Work with the organizations that are working on this stuff. We're one of them, and there's others that are around too. Feel free to join our organization. You can go on our website, and there's applications there. We're only $25 a year on that one. Susan, you've been a delight as always. You have some final comments for us on some things to sum up all this, and what can we expect for you in the future here too?
Well, at the moment, I'm writing 2 columns a week and some editorials for the Southern California News Group, and I'm working also full-time with Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. We'll be campaigning for that ballot initiative and doing some freelance work for other publications at the same time. So it's been very busy. I've perceived, since I've been doing this, since I was a candidate, 10 years ago, I have perceived a shift in the space-time continuum in California. You can perceive a ripple that people are asking more questions, and they're not happy with the way things are going. And there are enough people who remember that it was different before, who can be motivated to try to bring back some sanity to our policies. Our priorities from our government officials are sometimes very mixed up, and the people of California can turn that around, and I think they will.
I think that bottom line is, I think we have faith in our voters and our people to become educated and begin to speak out, and to let our neighbors know what we've found out. As time goes on, it's important to, as you have your neighbors come around, walking around the neighborhood, and somebody stops and asks you what's going on, let them know. Let them know what's happening so that they can become aware of this. A lot of people don't even know this is happening. They'll hear some stuff about the Woodland Hills Golf Course that's going to be in their face for a while at this point, but a lot of this other stuff they don't know about, and it's problematic. But Susan, it's people like you that are doing stuff in the papers and doing with your blogs and the other work that you're doing, and coming on here with us and giving us a good education of things in the background that a lot of us don't get a chance to see, and some of us don't want to see because it's the sausage is not terribly it's maybe
Hey, John, can I just say to Susan, she's always a really good guest, and it's been too long, okay?
Aw,
Since
thank you.
you've been, and also I've said this to you before, Susan. I don't know how you do it. You're knocking out these articles that are fact filled and give good insight and things, and you're just. I get the daily news, and you're in there all the time. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you fit it all in. So we really appreciate you coming tonight, and it's been very interesting discussions with everyone.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for those kind words.
Well, it's good stuff. We deeply appreciate the work you're doing. We deeply appreciate all those that stayed online with us tonight too. So we'll say goodnight to you, and thank you. Please join with us to make our community even better than what it already is, and making sure these people are not going to destroy it and turn these development laws into nothing but confetti. So let's get back to our local control and working on that. So thank you all. Thank you all for joining. Susan, thank you again for joining with us.
Thank you.
Good night to all. God bless, and
Thank
continue
you.
to do the good work in our community. We'll
Good
talk again.
night. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.